Texas A&M goes down to Alabama yesterday. Final score, A&M 20, Alabama 26. What did we learn? Every Saturday, it's an opportunity to learn something about your football team. If you're a Texas A&M fan waking up today on Sunday morning, what did you learn about your team? I think there's a couple of takeaways. As a whole, man, for A&M, I think this is a wildly different operation than what you had last year. Some of that's Bobby Petrino. Some of that's probably getting some of the bad apples out of your locker room, read the transfer portal. But I think this is a different operation than what we saw last year. And the way that A&M has played to this point communicates that. The way they played yesterday communicates that. A lot to talk about. We'll break it down really quickly, though. Make sure you're subscribed right here. College football, only college football, every single day of the year. We appreciate y'all for being dialed in. Also, follow me on Instagram and on Twitter at JD Pakel. Get at me on there. Let me know what y'all thought of yesterday. What did you learn about your football team? Curious to hear. So, the frustration for Texas A&M today is that the governor on your football team is very, very obvious, right? Like the offensive line had issues yesterday. Had issues. Allowed 5 sacks, multiple pressures, had trouble running the football. And then on the defensive side of things, the governor is there were very clear mismatches in the secondary that we had seen before in that Miami game, and we saw yesterday with Alabama throwing for over 300 yards. And, I mean, it kind of was what it was. Like, you dared Jalen Miller to beat you. He was able to do that. Jermaine Burton had a big day. It is what it is. So those things really limited A&M's game plan, because the game plan wasn't to go score for score with Alabama. It was to put pressure on them to be able to stop them up front with the way that they did, and then be able to put pressure on that offense to match you with scores. And they weren't able to make that the deal. So the reality is, like I said, this is very clearly a different Texas A&M team than we saw last year. It just is. It just is. And the front seven is full of the Avengers. Like, they had 6 sacks yesterday against Alabama. They had 7 the week before against Arkansas. And I think the playmakers that you have offensively were able to put pressure on Alabama's secondary, or at least gave you a chance to put pressure on that secondary. But the frustration was the offensive line didn't allow Max Johnson time. I actually think Max Johnson's a pretty good quarterback. Is he Connor Wegman? I don't know. I mean, probably. I mean, he's not by definition of him being Max Johnson, but we understand here, I think you can still win with Max Johnson. And the reality, I think, from yesterday is, even though he didn't have a ton of time, I saw really clear direction from the offense. Like, the whole thing with Bobby Petrino now being your head coach, or not being your head coach, being your offensive coordinator and your head coach, stepping aside and letting him call plays, it's working. You only scored 20 points, so that's frustrating. But you saw for a minute there, they were able to really put pressure on this Bama defense at points in time. Again, the governor, the offensive line. The governor, the secondary, and Alabama being able to match scores with you. So, when we look at A&M in the lens of what 2023 is, I think your happiness for A&M, you define success for Texas A&M, really comes down to anything else in life. Expectations. Like, what were your expectations for A&M coming into the year? If your expectations were college football playoff berth, national title, trip to Atlanta, yesterday probably disappoints you a little bit more than if your expectations were, hey, let's kind of get back to neutral. Because from my point of view, and this is, I want to make sure I tread lightly here, because A&M has a lot of talent on their roster, so they're not in a position where they have to get back to neutral. But I think for me, it was a team that is still learning how to win. Because even though Jimbo Fisher's been there for a number of years, this was a team went 5-7 last year and lost 30 players to the transfer portal. So nobody's excusing what happened yesterday. Nobody's excusing what's going on right now in College Station. But I think when you look at A&M, it would make sense for them to go from 5-7 to, 9-3, 8-4. Heck, if you go to 10-2, that's phenomenal. Phenomenal. But I think overall, if you're unhappy with 9 wins, it's okay, well, what was really the expectation? Was the expectation to go and win the SEC and play for the college football playoff? If it was, I understand. But for my money, you had a backup quarterback and you were able to give Alabama trouble. At the end of the day, it came down to Alabama had to recover an onside kick to win that football game. And you felt going into that game like A&M had more than a good shot to take down Bama. And nobody's saying there's anything with moral victories or saying that A&M should be satisfied. I'm just saying I think for where A&M is at right now under Jimbo Fisher and what last year was, I think they were in the negative last year and they're climbing to get to neutral this year. Now, anything past that, I'm not saying they can't accomplish it. I'm saying that's where my expectations lie with A&M. So going forward now, they still have a lot in front of them. At Tennessee next week, you still have at Ole Miss, still have at LSU. And as bizarre as it sounds, I still think that this is a team that can make a lot of noise, and I think this is a team that's going to have a lot still to play for when it comes to the end of their season, when it comes to what they're going to do in November and potentially December. So all that being said, for A&M, happiness, like anything else, is correlated with your expectations. Never happy to lose, but you look at what they are right now, and I think A&M, based on how they played against Alabama, will be just fine the rest of the way. The governor's frustrating. A lot of opportunity the rest of the way, though, for the Aggies. Make sure you're subscribed right here. College football, only college football every single day. Love y'all. We appreciate y'all. We're going to keep this party rolling. We will see y'all next time. Hey, y'all. Thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also, be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.